A crowded military bar, SEALs celebrating, and one woman sitting alone at the counter, hood up, no rank visible, when a cocky operator shoves her aside and asks the fatal question, "Do you know who I am?" The room laughs with him. But then the bartender freezes, senior operators snap to attention, and the entire bar goes silent as they recognize the tattoo on her arm. The woman he just humiliated commands every single person in that room. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about respect, authority, and the moment arrogance meets its match, consider subscribing. What happened next would change his life forever. The Anchor's Rest smelled like sweat, spilled beer, and victory. It was the kind of place where noise became a living thing, thick and primal, filling every corner with the raw energy of men who had just survived something most people could not imagine. Friday night, 2200 hours, and the bar was packed wall to wall with Navy SEALs fresh off Hell Week qualifiers. They moved through the crowd like sharks in shallow water, all coiled muscle and sharp eyes, recognizing each other through instinct more than sight. The way a man stood, the way he held his drink, the scars on his knuckles. These were tribal markers, unspoken but absolute. At the far end of the counter, barely visible through the chaos, sat a woman alone. She was hunched over a glass of whiskey, neat, her gray hoodie pulled up over her head. The fabric was worn, the kind of softness that came from years of use, not fashion. No patches, no insignia, no rank visible anywhere. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame a face that remained carefully angled away from the crowd. She looked like she did not belong. A contractor, maybe, or someone's wife waiting for her husband to finish one last round. The operators moving past her barely glanced her way. Their eyes slid over her like she was furniture. Behind the bar, Hook worked the taps with mechanical precision. He was 50-something, gray stubble on his jaw, hands scarred from decades of service before he traded his uniform for an apron. He had seen everything. Brawls, breakdowns, celebrations that turned into confessions. But every 30 seconds or so, his eyes flicked toward the woman at the end of the counter. Just a glance, quick, deliberate, then back to pouring. He said nothing, did nothing, just watched. The woman had not touched her drink in 10 minutes. She sat perfectly still, her fingers resting lightly on the base of the glass. Her posture was wrong for someone trying to blend in, too straight, too controlled, like a coiled spring pretending to be slack. But no one noticed. The bar was too loud, the energy too high. She was a ghost in a room full of legends. The door slammed open and the noise level spiked. Jackson Bridger walked in with his crew, and the room seemed to tilt toward him. He was mid-30s, square-jawed, built like a recruitment poster come to life. His trident pin gleamed on his chest, still shiny enough to catch the overhead lights. He had just returned from Yemen, a hostage rescue that made CNN. 6 civilians extracted from a compound in Sana'a while under heavy fire, the kind of op that made careers. Command loved him. His team worshipped him. And Bridger knew it. He was mid-story when he entered, gesturing wildly with both hands. His voice carried over the music and the crowd. So, I'm stacked on the door, right? Terp is screaming, hostages are crying, and I'm thinking, this is it. We breach, I go left, double tap the guard before he even knows we're there. His crew was eating it up, laughing, slapping his shoulder, feeding the beast. Bridger thrived on it, the attention, the validation, the certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He scanned the bar for an open spot, his eyes moving over faces and bodies with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. His gaze landed on the woman at the end of the counter. She was taking up 2 seats, one for her jacket, draped carelessly over the stool beside her. Bridger's jaw tightened. He pushed through the crowd, his crew trailing behind him like a wake. He reached the bar and tapped her shoulder, not gently. Yo, you mind? She did not look up. Her body shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, pulling her jacket closer. The movement was economical, practiced, like someone who had learned long ago not to waste energy on unnecessary reactions. Bridger glanced back at his boys. They were watching now, grins forming. He could feel the audience building, seriously. He leaned in, louder now. This is a SEAL bar, sweetheart. Maybe try the Applebee's down the road. Still nothing. Her fingers tightened slightly around the glass, just a fraction. Huck saw it from across the bar, and his hand froze mid-pour. One of Bridger's teammates, a younger operator named Calix, tugged at his arm. "Dude, let's just grab another spot. There's room by the pool table." Nah. Bridger's pride was hooked now. He reached past her, grabbed her jacket, and tossed it onto the floor. It landed in a heap near her feet. The bar did not stop. No one turned, no one cared. Just another Friday night power play in a room full of alphas. The woman finally looked up. Her eyes were gray, flat, empty in a way that made Bridger's grin falter for just a fraction of a second before he recovered. There was something in that stare, something that did not belong to someone who worked admin or waited tables on base. It was the kind of calm that came from seeing too much, from making decisions other people could not live with. Bridger leaned down, grinning wider now, playing to the growing audience. "Let me guess, waiting for your boyfriend, some contractor who thinks he's hard because he carries a rifle on a fob." His crew laughed. Phones were coming out now. A few other operators had stopped their conversations to watch. This was content. This was a story they would tell later. The woman's voice was quiet, flat. "You should move." Bridger straightened, threw his arms wide theatrically, and turned to the room. His voice boomed. "Do you know who I am?" The bar erupted. Cheers, whistles. Someone yelled, "Havoc's at it again." The energy was electric now. Bridger was feeding off it, his grin stretching wider. "I'm Jackson Bridger, SEAL Team 3. Just pulled 6 hostages out of a compound in Saninka while you were probably, filing paperwork, making coffee." The crowd roared. Bridger was fully in it now, playing the room like a seasoned performer. "So, yeah, I think maybe you should find somewhere else to drink, because this place is for people who actually earn their keep." The woman did not respond. She picked up her whiskey, took a slow sip, and set it down with deliberate care. The motion was so controlled it was almost theatrical, like she was giving him one last chance to walk away. Behind the bar, Hook stopped mid-pour, his face drained of color, the bottle in his hand tilted, beer spilling over the edge of the glass and onto the counter. He did not notice. Across the room, a Master Chief named Gavriel froze mid-sentence. He was 30 years in, covered in scars that told stories he would never share. His pool cue slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. The sound was sharp, cutting through the noise like a gunshot. A few heads turned, then a few more. Another operator, Strand, senior enlisted with a gray beard and eyes that had seen 3 wars, turned slowly toward the bar. His face went pale. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. The noise started to fade, not all at once, but in ripples. Conversations trailing off mid-sentence. Laughter dying in throats. Heads turning, phones lowering. The shift was subtle at first, then undeniable. Something was wrong. Bridger did not notice. He was still playing to the crowd, still riding the high. So, yeah, maybe next time you want to take up space in a SEAL bar, you should think twice about. The woman shifted in her seat, just slightly. Her right arm moved, adjusting her sleeve. The motion was casual, unconscious, but it was enough. Her sleeve rode up 1/2 inch, and there it was. A tattoo. Small, black ink on her inner forearm, partially hidden, but unmistakable once you knew what you were looking at. A trident, piercing a skull, wrapped in a chain of 13 stars. It was not a standard SEAL trident, it was the trident. The mark of the Naval Special Warfare Command Authority. An insignia so rare that fewer than 10 people alive had earned it. It did not signify an operator. It signified someone who commanded operators, someone who ran operations at the highest levels, someone who made calls that changed wars and never made the news. Gavriel saw it first. He snapped to attention so fast his beer bottle hit the floor and shattered. The sound was like a starter pistol. Within 5 seconds, Strand was standing at attention. Then another operator. Then another. Within 15 seconds, every SEAL in the bar was on their feet, bodies rigid, eyes forward. The silence was deafening. Bridger finally noticed. He turned, confusion flooding his face. "What the hell?" Hook's voice cut through the silence, low and sharp. "Officer on deck." Bridger's stomach dropped. The words did not make sense. His brain scrambled to catch up. He turned back to the woman. She was still sitting, still calm. But now she was looking directly at him. And in that moment, Bridger saw it. The authority. The weight. The absolute certainty of someone who had commanded men in life and death situations and lived with the consequences. She stood slowly. The room held its breath. Every operator's eyes followed her. No one moved, no one breathed. She reached down, picked up her jacket from the floor, and dusted it off once. The motion was deliberate, almost gentle, like she was giving him time to understand what he had just done. Then she walked toward the door. Her footsteps were the only sound in the entire bar. Every eye tracked her movement. Bridger stood frozen, his face pale, his hands trembling. She stopped at the threshold, looked back. Her voice was quiet, surgical. Bridger. 0600. My office. Then she was gone. The bar stayed silent for 5 full seconds. It felt like an eternity. Then Gabriel spoke, his voice tight with something between awe and horror. You just shoved Ghost. Bridger's face went white. His knees buckled slightly. He grabbed the edge of the bar for support. Calix grabbed his arm, eyes wide. Who? Who the hell is Ghost? Strand stepped forward. His eyes were locked on Bridger like he was looking at a dead man walking. Ghost is a legend. Rear Admiral Lennox Tenaway, commander of Naval Special Warfare, the woman who ran the most classified task force in JSOC history, the operator who orchestrated the Fallujah extraction in 2019, saved 12 operators and it never made the news. The one who... He stopped, shook his head. You don't talk about her ops. Most of them are still sealed, but everyone knows the stories. Everyone knows what she's done. Gabriel moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. She lost 6 operators in Helmand. A bad call. It broke her. But instead of quitting, she clawed her way back up through sheer will. Every mission since has been flawless. Flawless. She's the reason half of us are still alive. The room was still frozen. Every face was staring at Bridger with a mix of pity and disgust. Calix whispered, Dude, what are you gonna do? Bridger could not speak. His mouth was dry. His hands were shaking. His mind was replaying the last 5 minutes on a loop. The way he had shoved her. The way he had mocked her. The way he had asked, Do you know who I am? And she had said nothing. Because she did not need to. Hulk leaned across the bar, his eyes hard. You better pray she's merciful, son. Because if she's not... He did not finish. He did not need to. The message was clear. Bridger stood there, surrounded by his crew, surrounded by the men who had been cheering him on 30 seconds ago. But now they were silent. Now they were looking at him like he had just stepped on a landmine. And maybe he had. The sun was barely up when Bridger stood outside Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters. The building loomed in front of him, all concrete and chain link and American flags snapping in the wind. He was in full dress uniform, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, his hands clenched at his sides to stop them from shaking. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Those gray eyes, that calm, that absolute certainty. Calix stood beside him, looking equally terrified. Maybe she'll just chew you out. Maybe it'll be fine. Bridger said nothing. He knew better. This was not going to be fine. The door opened. A junior officer stepped out, clipboard in hand. Lieutenant Bridger, Admiral Tenaway will see you now. Bridger took a breath. His heart was hammering so hard he thought everyone could hear it. He stepped forward. Calix followed. They walked through the building in silence, their footsteps echoing off the tile floors. The walls were lined with photos, operations, commendations, faces of men who had given everything. Bridger had walked these halls 100 times, but today they felt different. Today they felt like a courtroom. They reached an unmarked door on the 3rd floor. The brass plate read, Rear Admiral L. Tenaway, Commander, Naval Special Warfare. Bridger had passed this door 100 times and never thought twice about it. Now it felt like the entrance to his own execution. The junior officer knocked once, then opened the door. Enter. The office was Spartan. No plaques, no photos, just maps, encrypted communications equipment, and a single desk. Lennox sat behind it, now in full-service khakis, rear admiral stars on her collar. She did not look up. She was reading a file, Bridger's file. He could see his name on the cover. Every operation, every evaluation, every commendation, every mistake. The silence stretched, 30 seconds, a minute. Bridger's pulse was roaring in his ears. Finally, she closed the file, looked up. Her eyes were ice. Do you know what happens when an operator publicly disrespects a commanding officer? Bridger's throat was dry. Ma'am, I didn't ask you a question. Her voice was calm. Lethal. I'm telling you. You lose your trident. You lose your team. You lose your career. You become a footnote, a cautionary tale they tell new recruits. Bridger's world tilted. His knees felt weak. But, Lennox continued, I'm not doing that. He blinked. Confused. Ma'am? Lennox stood, moved to a wall-mounted monitor. You're going to wish I had. If this story reminded you of someone who earned respect the hard way, someone who never needed to announce their authority, because it was simply undeniable, share your thoughts below. And, if you want more stories like this, stories about quiet strength and the price of arrogance, think about subscribing, because what happens next will show Bridger exactly what he's made of. The monitor flickered to life behind Lennox. A map of Yemen materialized, all red zones and hostile terrain, the kind of geography that swallowed teams whole and never gave them back. Bridger stared at it, his mind still reeling from what she had just said. You're going to wish I had. The words hung in the air like a threat he could not yet comprehend. Operation Houndstooth. Lennox's voice was clinical now, devoid of emotion. 12 days ago, a CIA asset, call sign Wraith, went dark in Marib province. He's embedded deep in Houthi territory. Multiple extraction attempts have failed. The terrain is hostile. The locals are hostile. And time is running out. A photograph appeared on the screen. A middle-aged man, Arabic features, eyes that seem to bore through the camera lens. Intelligence suggests Wraith has critical information on a weapons pipeline that could destabilize the entire Red Sea corridor. If he talks under interrogation, 30 Allied operatives die. If we don't retrieve him in 72 hours, he's executed on video and the intel dies with him. Bridger's pulse quickened. His training kicked in automatically, his mind already calculating approach vectors, threat assessments, extraction routes. But something felt wrong. Why was she telling him this? Why him? Lennox turned to face him fully. You're going to get him. The words landed like a physical blow. Ma'am, I'm assigning you to a 4-man direct action team. Insertion is 0300 tomorrow. You'll be working under a senior operator who has run this terrain before, someone who knows what it takes to survive out there. Bridger swallowed. Who's the team leader, ma'am? Lennox's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Almost amusement, almost pity. You'll find out at the briefing. She stepped closer, close enough that Bridger could see the faint scar along her jawline, barely visible, but undeniably there. A reminder of something she never talked about. You'll follow every order, you'll keep your mouth shut, and if you survive. She paused. Maybe you'll learn what respect actually means. Yes, ma'am. His voice was barely a whisper. Dismissed. Bridger and Calix walked down the corridor in silence. Their footsteps echoed off the walls, each step feeling heavier than the last. When they finally reached the parking lot, Calix grabbed Bridger's arm. Dude, she's sending you on a suicide run. Bridger pulled his arm free. He did not respond because he did not have an answer. Deep down, he knew Calix was right. But there was nothing he could do about it. He had made his bed in that bar. Now he had to lie in it. The briefing room was packed when they arrived at 1800 hours. Senior operators lined the walls, their faces hard and weathered. Men who had seen things most people could not imagine. Maps covered every surface. Satellite feeds flickered on monitors. The air was thick with tension, the kind that came before high-risk operations where not everyone came home. Bridger sat in the back, trying to make himself invisible. He could feel eyes on him. Word had spread. Everyone knew what he had done. Everyone knew he was being sent into the fire. The door opened and the room snapped to attention. A man entered, Corvin, mid-40s, grizzled, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand, the stump scarred over and weathered. Bridger knew the stories. Everyone did. Corvin was a living legend, part of the original JSOC task force that hunted high-value targets in Iraq. He had supposedly killed more enemy combatants than any active operator. He did not talk about it. He did not need to. Corvin moved to the front of the room without acknowledging anyone. He did not waste time with pleasantries. Houndstooth is a nightmare. The terrain is unforgiving. The Houthis have spotters on every ridge. The locals will sell you out for a pack of cigarettes. We go in quiet, extract wraith, and vanish. No heroics, no cowboy nonsense. His eyes landed on Bridger. The stare was cold, assessing. Anyone who thinks they're special gets people killed. Bridger looked down at his boots. Shame burned in his chest. Corvin continued, pointing to the map. This infiltration route was designed by Admiral Tenaway personally. She's run operations in this region before. You follow it exactly. No deviations, no improvisation. If you think you know better, you're wrong. Understood. The room responded in unison. Yes, Chief. The briefing continued. Maps, timelines, communications protocols. Everything was tight, precise, surgical. Bridger took notes mechanically, but his mind kept drifting back to Lennox. She had designed this route. She was watching. She knew this terrain better than anyone in the room. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. As the briefing ended, operators filed out in silence. Bridger stood to leave, but Corvin's voice stopped him. Bridger, stay. The room emptied. Corvin approached, his footsteps deliberate. He stopped inches away, close enough that Bridger could smell gun oil and sweat. You're the guy who shoved her. It was not a question. Yes, Chief. Corvin stared at him for a long moment. His eyes were hard, unreadable. You have no idea who she is. None. You think you do. You don't. Bridger wanted to respond, to defend himself, but the words died in his throat. Corvin turned and walked away, leaving Bridger alone in the empty briefing room. The maps stared back at him, red zones and kill boxes and 100 ways to die. And somewhere in all of that, Lennox was watching, waiting, testing him. The Black Hawk cut through the night like a blade. The rotor wash was deafening, the vibrations rattling through Bridger's chest. He sat across from Corvin, flanked by Calix and a massive breacher named Aerith, who had not spoken a single word since they boarded. Aerith's hands were the size of dinner plates, his face a mask of calm focus. He looked like he had been born for this. The pilot's voice crackled over comms. 5 minutes to LZ. Bridger checked his gear for the 10th time. Rifle, magazines, night vision, medical kit. Everything was in place, but his hands would not stop moving, checking, rechecking, trying to quiet the voice in his head that kept replaying the bar, the shove, the laughter, her eyes. Lennox's voice came over the radio, steady and clinical. Houndstooth 1, you are 5 minutes from landing zone. Weather is clear. No hostile movement detected on approach. Corvin keyed his mic. Copy, Overwatch, Overwatch, her call sign. She was not just commanding from some distant operations center. She was watching everything, every movement, every decision. Bridger realized she would see it all, every mistake, every moment of hesitation. There was no hiding out here. The helicopter flared hard, the world tilting as they descended into the valley. Ropes dropped. Corvin went first, fast roping into the darkness. Aerith followed, then Calix. Bridger went last, his gloves burning against the rope as he slid down into the night. His boots hit dirt, and he moved immediately, weapon up, scanning his sector. The helicopter lifted off, rotors fading into the distance until there was only silence. They moved in single file through the valley, no words, no lights, just the sound of boots on rock and the soft hiss of their breathing. The night vision turned the world into shades of green, every shadow a potential threat. Bridger's heart hammered in his chest, but his training took over, 1 foot in front of the other. Stay low, stay quiet, stay alive. Lennox's route was flawless. They used dry riverbeds for cover, avoiding known patrol routes, exploiting dead zones and enemy surveillance. Every turn, every pause, every movement felt calculated. Bridger realized she had walked this terrain before. Maybe not physically, but in her mind. She knew every ridge, every gully, every place where men could hide or die. Houndstooth 1, hold position. 2 hostiles, 200 meters north. Corvin raised his fist. The team froze. Through his night vision, Bridger saw 2 figures moving along a distant ridge. Houthi fighters, rifles slung across their backs, cigarettes glowing in the dark. They were talking, oblivious. The team did not move, did not breathe. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The figures moved on, disappearing into the night. Clear. Continue. They moved again. Bridger's legs burned, his lungs ached, but he kept going. Lennox's voice was a constant presence in his ear, guiding them around threats they could not see, steering them through a maze only she understood. It was not just command, it was something else, something deeper. She was conducting them like a symphony, every note precise, every movement deliberate. They reached the target compound just after. 0400. It was a mud brick structure, half collapsed, surrounded by scrub brush and scattered debris. According to Signal's intelligence, Wraith was inside, alive, waiting. Corvin signaled the team into position. Aerith moved forward, placing breaching charges with the care of a surgeon. Bridger covered the southern approach, his rifle trained on the dark windows. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then the world exploded. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. Muzzle flashes lit up the night. Bullets cracked overhead, snapping through the air like angry hornets. The ambush was perfect. Hidden positions. Overlapping fields of fire. The team had walked straight into a kill zone. Houndstooth 1, taking fire. Corvin's voice was tight, controlled, but the strain was audible. Bridger returned fire, dropping 2 hostiles who emerged from behind a low wall. Calyx was shouting into his radio. Aerith fired in controlled bursts, his massive frame absorbing the recoil like it was nothing. But there were too many. Houthis poured from hidden spider holes, from rooftops, from positions they should not have been able to reach. It was a trap. Lennox's voice cut through the chaos. Shift to contingency echo. Northeast ridge. Move now. Corvin did not hesitate. Fall back. Northeast ridge. Go, go, go. They broke contact, running uphill under withering fire. Bridger's lungs burned. His legs screamed. Bullets kicked up dirt at his feet. He fired blind behind him, not aiming, just suppressing, buying seconds. The ridge loomed ahead, steep and unforgiving. They climbed, hands and knees, weapons slung, clawing their way up the rocky slope. Extract point, Bravo. Helo inbound. 2 minutes. Bridger's mind raced. How did she know? How did she know exactly where they needed to go, exactly when they needed to move? It was impossible. Unless she had planned for this. Unless she had known the ambush was coming and built the contingency before they ever set foot on the ground. They crested the ridge and ran. The helicopter was a distant thrum growing louder. Almost there. Almost safe. Then Calyx screamed. He went down hard, clutching his leg. Blood poured between his fingers, dark and thick. Bridger spun, saw the wound, saw the terror in Calyx's eyes. Corvin was already moving past them. "Leave him! We gotta move!" "No!" The word came out before Bridger could think. He sprinted back, grabbed Calyx under the arms, hauled him up. Calyx was heavy, dead weight, gasping in pain. Bridger ran, every step agony, bullets snapping past his head. The helicopter descended, rotors screaming, side gunners laying down covering fire. Aerith reached the bird first, turned, and pulled Calyx aboard. Corvin jumped in. Bridger followed, collapsing on the deck as the helicopter lifted off. He looked down through the open door. The compound was swarming with hostiles, dozens of them, all firing uselessly at the retreating bird. They had been waiting. This was never a rescue. It was something else. "Good work, Houndstooth 1, RTB. Lennox's voice was calm, almost warm, like she had just watched them complete a training exercise, not escape a death trap by seconds. Bridger lay on the cold metal floor, gasping for air, his mind spinning. Calyx was moaning beside him, medics already working on his leg. Corvin sat against the bulkhead, his eyes on Bridger. Something had changed in that stare, something like respect. The medical bay smelled like disinfectant and blood. Calyx was on a gurney, his leg wrapped in fresh bandages, an IV pumping morphine into his system. He was pale but alive. The doctors said he would keep the leg. He would walk again. He might even operate again. But not for a long time. Bridger sat beside him, staring at the floor. His hands were still shaking. He could not stop replaying the moment. The gunfire, Calix going down, Corvin's order, leave him, and his response. No. The door opened. Corvin entered, holding 2 bottles of water. He tossed one to Bridger and sat down heavily in the chair across from him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Corvin twisted the cap off his bottle and took a long drink. "You did good out there." Bridger looked up. "Did I?" Corvin nodded. "Going back for Calix. That took guts. You told me to leave him." "I did." Corvin's expression was unreadable. "Because Admiral Tenaway told me to." The words hit Bridger like a punch to the gut. "What?" "The whole op was a test. Wraith was never in that compound. Bad intel was intentional. The ambush was expected. She designed the whole thing to see how you'd react under pressure, if you'd follow orders or follow your gut." Bridger felt sick. So Calix was always going to get hit. Corvin's voice was matter of fact, blank rounds mixed with live fire, controlled chaos. She wanted to see if you'd leave a man behind when ordered, or if you'd make the human call. Bridger could not speak. His mind was reeling. She had orchestrated everything, every step, every bullet, every decision, and she had watched him choose. "You did both." Corvin leaned forward. "You followed the tactical plan, got us to the extract point, but when it mattered, you went back. You made the call that saved a life instead of following an order that would have haunted you forever." Bridger's throat was tight. "Why?" Corvin stood, moved to the window. 15 years ago, she didn't. She followed orders, bad intel, worse decisions, and 6 operators died in Helmand Province because of it. The room felt cold. Bridger stared at Corvin's back, waiting. She could have called an abort, could have trusted her instincts. But she was young, cocky, thought the trident made her untouchable. So she pushed forward. And when the ambush came, she lost half her team in the first 60 seconds. She's spent every day since trying to earn the right to lead again. That's why she's here. That's why she doesn't tolerate arrogance. Because arrogance gets people killed. Corvin turned back to face him. "You reminded her tonight that sometimes the right call is the human call, even when it breaks the rules." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. Helmand wasn't just a bad mission. The man who set that ambush, the Taliban commander who killed her team. His name is Rashik al-Duri, and he's still out there." The door closed. Bridger sat alone in the silence, staring at Calix's sleeping form. His mind was spinning. Lennox, Ghost, Helmand, 6 dead operators, an enemy still alive after 15 years. And now she was in command, carrying that weight every single day, making decisions that could save lives or end them. He finally understood. She was not punishing him. She was teaching him, showing him what leadership actually cost, what it meant to live with the consequences of your choices. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a new question formed. If Rashik was still out there, what was Lennox planning to do about it? 2 days later, Bridger was in his barracks packing his gear when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Then something made him answer. Static filled the line, crackling and distorted. Then a voice, heavily accented, digitally altered. "You think you saved your brother in Marib. You didn't. We let you leave." Bridger's blood went cold. "Who is this?" "Tell Admiral Tenaway." The voice was calm, almost amused. "We remember Helmand. And we're coming." The line went dead. Bridger stared at his phone, his pulse hammering. The pieces clicked into place. The ambush was not part of Lennox's test. It was real, and whoever said it knew exactly who she was, knew what she had done, knew what she had lost. This was not over. It was just beginning. If you've ever felt the weight of a mistake you couldn't take back, or watched someone carry a burden they never talk about, leave a comment. And if you want to see how this ends, how Lennox faces the ghost that's haunted her for 15 years, consider subscribing. Because what comes next will reveal the truth about Helmand and the price of redemption. The emergency briefing was called at 0200 hours. Bridger arrived at the Tactical Operations Center with his uniform still half-buttoned, adrenaline burning through his veins. The building was lit up like midday, every window blazing against the pre-dawn darkness. Security had tripled since he had last been here. Armed guards stood at every entrance, their faces hard and alert. Something big was happening, something that made the air feel electric with tension. The briefing room was packed when he entered. Senior officers lined the walls, their faces grim and weathered. Intelligence analysts hunched over laptops, fingers flying across keyboards, the blue glow of screens reflecting in their tired eyes. Corbin stood near the front, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. When Bridger caught his eye, Corbin gave a single nod. "Sit down. Stay quiet. Watch." Bridger found a seat near the back and tried to make himself invisible. Around him, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Something was coming. Something that had pulled every senior operator out of bed in the middle of the night. He could feel it in the way people moved, the way they spoke in hushed tones, the way their eyes kept drifting to the door at the front of the room. The door opened and everyone snapped to attention. Lennox entered, and Bridger felt his breath catch. She was dressed in full combat fatigues, not her usual service khakis. No stars on her collar, no rank insignia visible anywhere. Just black tactical gear, a sidearm strapped to her thigh, and boots that looked like they had seen 1,000 operations. She looked like an operator, not an admiral. The transformation was jarring, almost disturbing. This was Ghost, not the commander behind a desk making strategic decisions, but the woman who had run missions in the dark and come back covered in other people's blood. She moved to the head of the table without ceremony, her movements precise and economical, at ease. The room sat as one, the scrape of chairs the only sound. Lennox placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. Her eyes swept across every face in the room, taking inventory, assessing readiness. Then she spoke. "I need to tell you something I've never told anyone outside classified channels." The room went silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming in the walls, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Bridger felt his pulse quicken. Helmand Province, 2010. I was a lieutenant commander leading a direct action team targeting a Taliban commander named Rashid al-Duri. Her voice was steady, clinical, like she was reading from an after-action report. But Bridger could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers pressed white against the edge of the table. Intel said he was alone in a compound outside Lashkar Gah, high-value target, time-sensitive operation. I had authorization to move immediately, no backup, no air support on standby. Just my team and the mission. She paused, her jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. It was a trap. Rashid was not alone. He had 30 fighters waiting in prepared positions. We walked into a kill box. The ambush started before we even breached the outer wall. My team fought for 6 hours. 6 hours of close-quarters combat with no reinforcements, no medevac, nothing but what we carried on our backs. 6 of my operators died that night. 6 men who trusted me to bring them home. Bridger felt like he could not breathe. Around the room, faces were pale. Even the senior officers who had heard rumors, who thought they knew the story, looked shaken hearing it said out loud with such brutal honesty. Rashid escaped during the chaos. For 15 years, I've tracked him. Followed every lead, every whisper, every piece of intelligence that crossed my desk. He rebuilt his network, moved through Yemen, Syria, Iraq, back to Yemen, changed his appearance, changed his tactics. But he never stopped operating. He's one of the most dangerous militant leaders in the region now. And 2 days ago, we intercepted communications confirming his location and his next target. A satellite image appeared on the screen behind her. A sprawling compound in Bahrain, surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Heat signatures indicated multiple buildings, dozens of personnel moving through the complex. This was not a small operation. This was a fortress. Rashid is planning a mass casualty attack on NATO Forward Operating Base Sentinel in Bahrain. 300 personnel stationed there. Most of them support staff, cooks, medics, logistics specialists, 20-year-olds fresh out of basic training who joined to get college money and never expected to be in a combat zone. The attack is scheduled for 72 hours from now. Vehicle-borne explosives, coordinated small arms fire, It will be a massacre. The room was frozen. Bridger could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. I'm going in. Lennox's voice cut through the silence like a blade. I'm leading the strike team personally. We insert tonight. We eliminate Rashik and dismantle his operational cell before they can execute the attack. This ends now, tonight, on my terms. Every officer in the room stiffened. Admirals did not run direct action missions. It was unprecedented, dangerous, against every protocol in the book. A senior officer near the front, a captain with 30 years of service, leaned forward carefully. Ma'am, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. Command protocol dictates that flag officers remain in strategic oversight positions. The risk of capture or casualty is too high for someone in your position. I'm not asking permission. Lennox's eyes were steel, cold and unyielding. I'm informing you. The mission is happening. The team is assembled. The transport is ready. I will be on the ground leading the operation, and I'm bringing a hand-picked team of operators who understand what's at stake. Her gaze moved across the room and landed on Bridger. The weight of that stare was like a physical pressure. You're coming with me. Bridger's heart stopped. Every head in the room turned to look at him. He felt the weight of their stares, the questions forming behind their eyes, the disbelief. Why him? Why the operator who had humiliated her in front of an entire bar just days ago? Why the lieutenant who had barely survived his last mission? It made no sense to anyone watching. But Lennox was not looking at anyone else, just him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes. Not anger, not resentment, something closer to recognition. Bridger stood, his voice steady despite the chaos racing through his chest. Yes, ma'am. The briefing continued for another 40 minutes. Maps, timelines, intelligence assessments, threat matrices, extraction contingencies. Every detail was planned with surgical precision. Lennox had clearly been working on this for days, maybe weeks. Every possible scenario had been wargamed, every risk calculated. This was not a revenge mission driven by emotion. This was a military operation executed with the full weight of 15 years of preparation behind it. When the room finally cleared, Lennox approached Bridger. She stopped a few feet away, close enough to speak quietly without being overheard. You don't have to do this. I can assign someone else. Someone with more experience in urban close-quarters combat. Someone who has worked this region before. Bridger met her eyes without flinching. Yes, I do, ma'am. She studied him for a long moment, searching for something. Doubt maybe, fear, hesitation. Whatever she was looking for, she did not find it. Then she nodded slowly. You asked me once who I am. I'm the person who lives with the weight of every decision I've ever made, every operator I've sent into danger, every mission that went wrong, every face I see when I close my eyes at night. That's command. That's the cost. If you come with me tonight, you need to understand that. This is not about revenge. It's about making sure no one else dies because I hesitated, because I second-guessed my instincts, because I let pride override judgment. I understand, ma'am. Good. She turned to leave, then stopped. Her voice dropped lower. Bridger, out there, I'm not an admiral, I'm an operator. You follow my lead, you stay sharp, you trust your training, and you come home. That's the mission. Nothing more, nothing less. Yes, ma'am. She walked away, leaving Bridger standing alone in the empty briefing room. The maps on the walls stared back at him, red zones and threat assessments, and 100 ways to die. For the first time since the bar, he felt like he understood her. Not completely. Maybe no one ever could, but enough. Enough to know that the woman who had stood silently while he mocked her was the same woman who would walk into hell to save 300 people she had never met. Because that was what leadership actually meant. It was not speeches or medals or rank insignia. It was the willingness to carry the weight so others did not have to. The sun had not yet risen when the team assembled on the tarmac. The Black Hawk sat waiting, rotors already beginning to turn, the whine of the engines building into a roar. Bridger checked his gear one final time. Rifle, magazines, night vision, medical kit, breaching charges, communications equipment. Everything was in place, meticulously organized, ready. Around him, the other operators did the same. Corvin, Aerith. 2 other SEALs. Bridger recognized but had never worked with directly. call sign Vex, a sniper with more confirmed kills than anyone wanted to count, and call sign Iron, a communications specialist who could hack enemy frequencies and call in air support in 3 languages. Lennox was the last to arrive. She moved across the tarmac with purpose, her rifle slung across her chest, her face already painted in dark camouflage patterns. She looked dangerous. She looked ready. She looked exactly like what she was, a warrior who had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. She gathered the team in a tight circle, her voice barely audible over the rotor noise. This is a direct action raid, hard target, high risk. We insert 1 click west of the compound, move on foot under cover of darkness. Vex takes overwatch position on the ridge. The rest of us breach and clear. Primary objective is Rashik. Secondary objective is intelligence recovery, any computers, phones, documents. Tertiary objective is ordnance disposal. If they have explosive staged for the attack, we render them inoperable. Extraction window is 30 minutes from breach. If we're not at the landing zone when the bird arrives, it leaves without us. Questions. No one spoke. There were no questions. The mission was clear. The stakes were understood. Lennox looked at each of them in turn. 15 years ago, I lost 6 operators because I made bad calls, because I let ego override caution. I've spent every day since trying to honor their sacrifice by being better, by making sure no one else dies because of my mistakes. Tonight, we finish what started in Helmand. We make sure Rashik never kills another operator, never executes another attack. We end this, together. Are we clear? A chorus of affirmatives. Yes, ma'am, Crystal, hoo-ah. Then let's go bring some people home. They boarded the Black Hawk and lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness. The flight across the Persian Gulf was silent, each operator lost in their own thoughts, their own preparations. Bridger sat across from Lennox, watching her check her rifle with the same methodical precision she brought to everything. Her face was painted in dark camouflage, her eyes hidden behind tactical goggles. She looked 20 years younger out here. She looked like she had never stopped being an operator, like the desk and the rank and the weight of command had all just been temporary costumes. This was who she really was, Ghost, the legend operators whispered about in ready rooms. The woman who had walked through fire and come out forged into something harder than steel. Corvin sat beside Bridger, his face impassive. But when he caught Bridger's eye, he gave a small nod. You good? Bridger nodded back. Yeah, I'm good. She's taking you because you proved something in Marib. Corvin's voice was low, meant only for Bridger. You went back for Calix when I ordered you to leave him. That took guts. But more than that, it took judgment. The ability to know when orders should be followed and when they should be broken. That's what she needs out here. Operators who can think. Who can make the hard calls when everything goes sideways? What if I make the wrong call? Corvin's expression was grim. Then you live with it. Same as she does. Same as all of us. That's the job. The helicopter banked hard, descending toward the landing zone. Lennox's voice came over comms, calm and steady. 30 seconds, check your gear, stay sharp, trust your training, and remember, we're not going in there to die. We're going in there to make sure those 300 kids at FOB Sentinel wake up tomorrow morning. That's the mission. The Black Hawk flared and ropes dropped into the darkness. Lennox went first, fast roping down without hesitation. Corvin followed, then Bridger. His gloves burned against the rope as he descended, boots hitting sand with a soft thud. He moved immediately, weapon up, scanning his sector through night vision. The world was green and shadowy. Every rock and bush a potential threat. The helicopter lifted off, rotors fading into the distance until there was only silence. The compound was 1 kilometer east, barely visible as a dark mass against the horizon. Lennox took point, moving with the confidence of someone who had studied every inch of this terrain. The team followed in single file, spacing tight, communication nonverbal, hand signals, eye contact, the kind of coordination that came from years of working together. Except Bridger was new to this team. He had to work twice as hard to keep up, to anticipate movements, to stay synchronized. They moved through a dry wadi, using the natural depression for cover. The sand was soft underfoot, muffling their footsteps. Above them, the sky was still dark, the stars brilliant and cold. Bridger's heart hammered in his chest, but his hands were steady. Training took over, one foot in front of the other. Stay low, stay quiet, stay alive. Vex broke off first, moving up the ridge to establish Overwatch. His voice came over comms 90 seconds later. Overwatch set. I have eyes on target. Count 12 hostiles visible. Multiple buildings. Primary structure is the large one northeast corner. That's where the heat signatures are concentrated. Copy. Lennox's voice was clinical. Iron, you're with me and Bridger. We take primary structure. Corvin, Aerith, you clear the outbuildings. Vex, you cover our approach and call out threats. Everyone stays on comms. No heroics. We go in fast, we go in quiet, we finish this. They reached the outer perimeter of the compound. The walls were crumbling mud brick, 10 feet high, topped with rusted razor wire. Aerith moved forward with bolt cutters, snipping through the wire with practiced efficiency. The sound was barely audible, metal clicking softly. He created an opening and waved them through. Lennox went first, moving through the gap like smoke. Bridger followed, his rifle tracking left as Iron covered right. The compound interior was a maze of buildings and shadows. Corvin and Aerith peeled off toward the outbuildings. Lennox moved toward the primary structure, her movements fluid and controlled. They stacked on the main door. It was heavy wood, reinforced with metal bands, not breachable quietly. Lennox signaled Aerith. He moved up, placed a small shaped charge, and stepped back. 3, 2, 1. The charge blew with a muffled thump, the door sagging inward. Lennox went through the breach immediately, her rifle up, and Bridger followed 2 steps behind. The interior was dark, lit only by a single bulb hanging from exposed wiring. The space opened into a larger room, concrete floors, walls lined with weapons racks, AK-47s, RPGs, crates of ammunition. This was not just a hideout. This was an armory, and in the center of the room, surrounded by 5 armed guards, stood a man Bridger recognized from the briefings. Rashik al-Duri. Older now, gray streaking through his beard. But the eyes were the same, cold, calculating, alive with a kind of feral intelligence. The moment stretched. Rashik saw Lennox and his expression changed. Recognition. Then something that might have been respect, or fear, or both. He spoke in Arabic, his voice calm. I knew you would come eventually, Ghost. 15 years is a long time to wait. But I knew you would not forget. Lennox did not respond. She just raised her rifle. The guards moved and the room exploded into violence. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like strobe lights. Bridger dropped 2 guards on the left, his training taking over, muscle memory guiding his movements. Iron took 3 on the right, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. Corvin's voice came over comms. Outbuildings clear, moving to support. But there were more hostiles pouring in from side rooms. This was not just 5 guards. This was a prepared defense. Rashik had known they were coming, or he had been ready for this possibility. Bridger felt something slam into his chest plate, the impact driving the air from his lungs. His vest caught the round, but he went down hard, gasping, his vision swimming. Through the chaos, he saw Rashik raising his rifle, aiming directly at Bridger's head. Time seemed to slow. Bridger's weapon was too far. He could not move fast enough. He saw Rashik's finger tightening on the trigger. This was it. This was how it ended. 3 shots cracked through the noise. Precise, controlled, professional. Rashik jerked backward, his rifle falling from his hands. He hit the floor and did not move. Lennox stood over Bridger, her weapon still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. Her face was calm, emotionless. She had just killed the man who had haunted her for 15 years, and she looked like she had simply completed a task on a checklist. No satisfaction, no relief, just cold, professional competence. She reached down and pulled Bridger to his feet with surprising strength. Stay with me. We're not done yet. The rest of the compound was chaos. Corvin and Aerith were engaged with hostiles near the western wall. Vex was calling out targets from Overwatch, his rifle sending precise shots into the darkness. Iron was working on a laptop he had pulled from one of the rooms, downloading intelligence while rounds snapped overhead. Lennox moved through it all like a conductor leading a symphony, calling targets, directing fire, keeping the team coordinated. They cleared the remaining rooms methodically, every corner, every shadow, every potential threat. When the last hostile was down, Lennox called it. Compound secure. Iron, what do you have? Encrypted files, communications logs, names and locations of cell members across 3 countries. This is everything. Iron's voice was tight with adrenaline. This dismantles the entire network. Copy. Package it and let's move. Vex, call the bird. Bird inbound. 3 minutes. They moved toward the extraction point, a clearing 200 meters north of the compound. Behind them, Aerith placed demolition charges on the armory. The explosives would destroy everything Rashik had built. Every weapon, every plan, every trace of the network that had killed hundreds. The Black Hawk descended just as the charges detonated. The explosion lit up the night sky, a rolling fireball that sent debris raining down across the compound. The team piled into the helicopter and it lifted off, banking hard away from the blast zone. Bridger collapsed onto the deck, his chest aching where the round had impacted his vest. Around him, the other operators were doing the same. Exhausted, alive, successful. Lennox sat against the bulkhead, her rifle resting across her lap. She was staring out the open door, watching the burning compound disappear into the distance. Her face was unreadable. Bridger wanted to say something, to acknowledge what had just happened, to thank her for saving his life, but the words felt inadequate. So he just sat there, breathing, alive, watching her watch the desert burn below. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost lost in the rotor noise. "You saved my life in Mareb. I just returned the favor." Bridger shook his head. "No, ma'am. You reminded me why I do this." She turned to look at him then. Something in her expression softened. Just slightly. Just enough to be visible. "Good. Don't forget it. Don't ever let yourself become so arrogant that you forget why we're out here. It's not about the medals or the recognition or proving how tough you are. It's about the people we protect, the ones who never know our names, the ones who get to wake up tomorrow because we did our job tonight. I won't forget, ma'am." She nodded once, then leaned back against the bulkhead and closed her eyes. Within minutes, despite the noise and the adrenaline still coursing through everyone's veins, she was asleep. The sleep of someone who had finally closed a chapter that had been open for 15 years. The team watched her in silence, a kind of reverence settling over them. This was Ghost, this was the legend, and they had just witnessed why. The Anchor's Rest looked exactly the same when Bridger walked in a week later. Same noise, same crowd, same energy pulsing through the space like a living thing. But everything felt different now. He moved through the bar with a quiet confidence he had not possessed before, the kind that came not from arrogance, but from understanding, from knowing what leadership actually cost, from seeing it up close. Operators glanced his way as he passed. Some nodded, some raised their drinks in silent acknowledgement. Word had spread through the community the way it always did. Whispers, stories passed in ready rooms and training facilities. He had gone into hell with Ghost and come back. That meant something. That earned respect in a way no amount of bravado ever could. Calix was at a corner table, his legs still in a brace but healing well. He waved Bridger over, and they sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of quiet that only existed between people who had bled together. "You good?" Calix asked eventually. "Yeah." Bridger nodded. "I'm good. Better than good, actually. Heard you went back out with her." Calix's voice was low. Heard it was the real deal this time. It was. Bridger took a long drink of his beer. "And I finally understand why everyone talks about her the way they do. She's not just a good operator. She's something else entirely. She carries the weight of every decision, every loss, every mistake, and she uses it to make sure no one else has to carry the same burden. That's command." Calix raised his bottle. "To Ghost, and to operators who know when to follow orders and when to follow their gut." They drank. Around them, the bar pulsed with life. Stories being told, bonds being formed. The endless cycle of warriors at rest before the next mission called them away. At the bar, Bridger noticed a young operator sitting alone, hood up, hunched over a drink. The body language was familiar, lost, out of place, trying to figure out if this was where he belonged. Bridger had worn that same posture not long ago. He stood, moved to the bar, and gently tapped the kid's shoulder. "Hey, you good?" The operator looked up, startled. His face was young, barely old enough to drink legally. Yeah, just first deployment nerves, I guess. Trying to figure out if I'm cut out for this. Bridger sat down beside him, ordered 2 beers. It gets easier. The nerves don't go away completely. But you learn to channel them. You learn to trust your training and your team. And you learn that it doesn't matter who you are or where you came from. It matters what you do when everything goes wrong. That's when you find out what you're really made of. The kid nodded, grateful for the words. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. What's your name? Jenner. Just finished Bud S last month. This is my first assignment to a team. Bridger extended his hand. Bridger. Welcome to the community. You'll do fine. Just remember to stay humble. Listen more than you talk. And never assume you know better than the operators who have been doing this for decades. That lesson cost me. Don't let it cost you. They talked for a while longer. Bridger found himself passing on the lessons he had learned, the hard truths about leadership and humility, and the cost of arrogance. He realized this was what Lennox had been trying to teach him all along. That wisdom was not something you hoarded. It was something you shared, something you passed down to the next generation, so they did not have to learn everything the hard way. Across the bar, Hoke caught Bridger's eye and nodded once, a gesture of respect from a man who had seen everything and forgotten nothing. Bridger nodded back, feeling something settle in his chest. Acceptance, belonging, the knowledge that he had earned his place in this community, not through bravado, but through blood and sweat and the willingness to learn from his mistakes. The door opened and the energy in the room shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Lennox walked in. She was in plain clothes, hood up, anonymous again. Just another person trying to blend into the background. She moved to the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and sat alone at the far end of the counter. No one bothered her, no one approached, but every seal in the room knew she was there. You could feel it, the shift in the atmosphere, the quiet acknowledgement of authority that did not need to announce itself. Bridger raised his beer slightly in her direction. She did not look over, but the corner of her mouth lifted, just barely, just enough to acknowledge the gesture. Then she turned back to her drink, and the moment passed. She sat there alone, exactly as she had been the night Bridger shoved her. Nothing had changed outwardly, but everything had changed beneath the surface. Respect had been earned, understanding had been achieved, and the debt that began in humiliation had been paid in blood and trust. Bridger turned back to Jenner, continuing their conversation. Around them, the bar lived and breathed and pulsed with the energy of warriors at rest. And at the end of the counter, almost invisible in the crowd, Ghost sat with her whiskey and her memories. Exactly where she belonged, exactly where she had always been, waiting, watching, ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Bridger stood outside Lennox's office one final time. This visit was different. He was not shaking. He was not afraid. His hands were steady at his sides. He was just there to deliver something he had spent the last 3 days writing. A report. Not the standard after-action format, filled with tactical assessments and threat evaluations. Something more personal. Something that tried to capture what he had learned out there in the dark. He knocked once. The sound echoed in the empty hallway. Enter. He stepped inside. Lennox was at her desk, reading through a stack of intelligence reports. She looked up, her expression neutral, and gestured to the chair across from her. Bridger sat and placed a folder on her desk. "Ma'am, I wanted to return this. My after-action report from the Bahrain operation." Lennox opened it. Her eyes moved over the pages, scanning quickly at first, then slowing as she read more carefully. Bridger had spent hours on it, trying to capture not just what happened, but what it meant. Not just the tactical lessons, but the deeper truths about leadership and humility, and what it meant to earn respect rather than demand it. One line near the end stood out, underlined twice in pen. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the one everyone trusts when the room goes silent. It's about carrying the weight so others don't have to. It's about knowing that every decision you make will haunt you for the rest of your life, and choosing to make those decisions anyway. Lennox read it twice. Her finger traced the words on the page, then she looked up. Her expression was softer than he had ever seen it. Not quite a smile, but something close. Something that carried approval and understanding in equal measure. This is good work, Lieutenant. This shows growth, real growth. Not just as an operator, but as a leader. Thank you, ma'am. You're gonna make a fine commander someday. When you're ready. When you've earned it the way it's supposed to be earned, through sacrifice and mistakes and the willingness to learn from both. I hope so, ma'am. Dismissed. Bridger stood, saluted, and turned to leave. He was almost at the door when her voice stopped him. Bridger? He turned. Yes, ma'am. She was quiet for a moment, choosing her words with the same precision she brought to everything. You asked me who I am, back in that bar. You wanted to know if I understood who you were, what you had accomplished. Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of 15 years of grief and growth. I'm the person who lost 6 operators because I was too arrogant to admit I was wrong. I'm the person who spent every day since trying to honor their sacrifice by being better, by making sure no one else dies because of pride or ego, or the belief that rank makes you infallible. That's who I am. That's what this job costs. And if you're going to lead, if you're going to command, you need to understand that cost. You need to be willing to pay it every single day for the rest of your career. Bridger nodded slowly. His throat was tight. Then, you're exactly who should be in command, ma'am, because you understand what it costs, and you're willing to pay it anyway. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Just once. A gesture of mutual respect, of understanding achieved through shared experience and shared blood. You're dismissed, Lieutenant. Stay safe out there. Yes, ma'am. Bridger left the office and walked down the corridor, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The weight that had been pressing on his chest since the bar, since the moment he shoved her and asked that fatal question, was finally gone, replaced by something better, understanding, respect. The knowledge that leadership was not about dominance or bravado. It was about service, about sacrifice, about being willing to carry the burdens that would crush lesser people. He did not know what the future held. More missions, more danger, more decisions that would shape lives and end them. But he knew one thing for certain. He would never again ask someone if they knew who he was, because the people who mattered, the people whose respect was worth earning, never needed to ask. They simply knew, and they proved it through their actions, not their words. Lennox sat alone in her office after Bridger left. The morning sun was streaming through the window now, casting long shadows across her desk. She pulled open a drawer and removed a photograph that she kept hidden from public view. 6 faces stared back at her. Young, confident, alive. Her team from Helmand. The men she had lost because she had been too arrogant to call an abort, too proud to admit the intel was bad, too convinced of her own invincibility to see the trap until it was far too late. She had carried their faces with her every day for 15 years, in briefings and combat, and the quiet moments when sleep would not come. They were the reason she had clawed her way back up through the ranks, despite the whispers and the doubt. The reason she had become Ghost. The reason she would never stop trying to be better than she was that night in Helmand when everything went wrong and 6 families received folded flags. She touched the photograph gently, her fingers tracing the edges where the paper had worn smooth from handling. We got him. Her voice was barely a whisper in the empty office. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. But we got him, and we saved 300 others. I hope that counts for something. I hope you can rest now. She placed the photo back in the drawer and closed it with careful precision. Then she stood, straightened her uniform, checked her appearance in the small mirror by the door. She looked tired. Lines had deepened around her eyes. Gray was creeping into her hair despite her efforts, but her eyes were clear, steady, ready. She walked out of her office and down the corridor. There was always another mission waiting, always another threat to assess, always another chance to make sure no one else had to carry the weight she carried. That was command. That was the cost she had chosen to pay, and she would pay it every single day for the rest of her life because that was what it meant to be Ghost. Not a legend carved from myth and whispers, not an untouchable figure immune to doubt and fear, just a person trying to honor the dead by protecting the living, one mission at a time, one decision at a time, one life at a time. The sun was setting over Coronado when Lennox walked back into the Anchor's Rest that evening. The bar was filling up again, the weekend crowd arriving in waves. Operators coming in after a long week of training, the noise building like a wave, the energy rising with each passing minute. She moved to her usual spot at the end of the counter, sat down without ceremony, and waited. Hauk appeared without her saying a word. He poured her usual whiskey, neat, and slid the glass across the scarred wood. She nodded her thanks. He nodded back. No words necessary. Just the quiet understanding between people who had both served and both understood what that service cost. She picked up the glass and took a small sip. The whiskey burned going down, warm and familiar. Around her, the bar lived and breathed, conversations rising and falling, laughter erupting from corner tables, stories being told and retold, growing slightly more embellished with each telling. This was the sound of life continuing, of warriors at rest between battles, of people who had seen darkness choosing to find light wherever they could. Bridger was across the room with young Jenner, talking quietly. She watched them for a moment, saw the way Bridger leaned in to listen, the way he nodded at something Jenner said, the way he was passing on wisdom earned through pain. He was learning, growing, becoming the kind of leader the community needed, the kind who understood that rank was not a crown, but a burden. That authority was not given, but earned. That respect came not from demanding it, but from deserving it. She turned back to her drink, satisfied. The cycle continued. Wisdom passed from one generation to the next. Mistakes learned from. Costs understood. This was how communities survived, how traditions persisted, how the warrior ethos was maintained across decades and centuries, not through rigid hierarchy, but through shared sacrifice and mutual respect. The door opened again, and more operators filed in. Some she recognized, some she did not. All of them part of the same tribe, the same brotherhood forged in fire and blood and the willingness to stand between chaos and civilization. They did not notice her at first. She was just another shadow at the end of the bar, just another person trying to decompress after a hard week. But slowly, one by one, they realized she was there. The recognition spread like ripples across still water. Conversations quieted slightly. Postures straightened just a fraction. Not out of fear, out of respect, out of acknowledgement that someone who had earned her place through sacrifice was present. They did not approach. They did not need to. The acknowledgement itself was enough. Lennox sat with her whiskey and her memories and watched the world continue around her. She thought about Rashik, about Helmand, about 15 years of hunting and planning and waiting for the chance to make things right. That chapter was closed now. The man who had killed her team was dead. The network he had built was dismantled. The attack on Ephob's Sentinel had been prevented. 300 people would wake up tomorrow morning, never knowing how close they had come to dying, never knowing that a woman they had never met had walked into hell to make sure they got to live. And that was fine. That was how it should be. The best operations were the ones no one ever heard about. The best leadership was the kind that worked in shadows and silence. The best warriors were the ones who did not need recognition because they understood that the work itself was the reward. She raised her glass slightly, a private toast to no one and everyone, to the 6 she had lost, to the hundreds she had saved over the years, to the operators who trusted her even when she did not trust herself, to Bridger, who had learned the hard way what respect actually meant and was now teaching others, to Corvin and Aerith and Vex and Iron and every operator who put their life on the line because someone had to, and to herself for surviving long enough to close the chapter that had defined her for so long. The whiskey burned going down. She set the glass on the counter and stared at the amber liquid, watching the way the overhead lights played through it. The bar continued around her, life continuing, the world turning. The fight never ending, but neither did the people willing to fight it. Outside, the last light faded from the California sky. Stars began to appear, cold and distant and eternal. Inside, the bar grew louder as the night deepened. Music played, drinks flowed, stories were told. And at the end of the counter, almost invisible in the crowd, Ghost sat alone with her whiskey and her ghosts. She thought about tomorrow, about the briefing scheduled for 0800, about the new intelligence that had crossed her desk that afternoon, about the next mission that would inevitably come because the work was never finished. There was always another threat, always another group of people who needed protecting, always another operator who needed guidance. But tonight, just for this moment, she let herself rest. Let herself exist in the space between missions. Let herself be just another person in a bar full of warriors, drinking away the stress and the fear and the weight of command. Tomorrow, she would put the uniform back on, would step back into the role that defined her, would carry the burden that came with stars on her collar and the authority to send people into danger. But tonight, she was just Lennox, just a person who had survived when others had not, who had learned from mistakes that cost lives, who had spent 15 years trying to honor the dead by serving the living, and who would continue to do so for as long as she had breath in her body and strength in her limbs. She finished her whiskey and set the empty glass down. Hoke appeared again, eyebrow raised in silent question. One more. She nodded. He poured and disappeared. She picked up the fresh glass and turned slightly on her stool, looking out across the bar. All these faces, all these stories, all these people who had chosen this life, knowing what it would cost them. Bridger caught her eye from across the room. He raised his beer slightly. She raised her whiskey in response. A silent acknowledgement between two people who understood what leadership meant, who had learned that authority was not about power, but about service, not about dominance, but about sacrifice, not about being the loudest voice, but about being the one everyone trusted. When everything went quiet, the moment passed. Bridger turned back to Jenner. Lennox turned back to her drink. The bar continued its rhythm, and somewhere in the back of her mind, the faces of her lost team looked on, not in accusation, not in disappointment, but in peace, because she had finally done what she set out to do 15 years ago. She had made it right, had honored their sacrifice, had proven that their deaths were not in vain. She closed her eyes for just a moment, letting the noise of the bar wash over her like a wave. When she opened them again, the world was still there, still turning, still demanding attention and action and sacrifice. And she was ready. She would always be ready. Because that was who she was. Not just Ghost the Legend, not just Admiral Tenaway the commander, but Lennox, the operator who learned the hard way that leadership was earned in silence and proven in action, who understood that the most important voices in any room were often the quietest, who knew that real authority never needed to announce itself because it simply was. And as the night deepened and the bar filled to capacity and the noise reached its peak, she sat at the end of the counter nursing her whiskey and her memories, exactly where she belonged, exactly where she had always been, waiting, watching, ready for whatever came next, because the mission never ended, the work was never finished, and there would always be people who needed someone to stand between them and the darkness. That someone was her. That was her purpose. That was her burden. And she would carry it with honor and dignity and the quiet strength that defined true leadership, not today or tomorrow, but every day for the rest of her life, because that was what it meant to be Ghost, and she would not have it any other way. Have you ever met someone who carried the weight of impossible decisions and never asked for recognition? Someone who led not with words but with presence and action. Someone who understood that real authority is earned in silence, proven in crisis, and maintained through integrity. If this story reminded you of anyone in your life, someone who sacrificed without seeking credit, who led without needing to announce their position, share their story in the comments below. The world needs to know about these quiet warriors who make everything possible. And if you believe the best leaders are the ones who never have to tell you they're in charge because their actions speak louder than any words ever could, consider subscribing. Because the most powerful people in any room are often the quietest. The most important lessons are the ones that cost the most to learn, and the greatest leaders are the ones who understand that command is not a privilege but a burden, carried with grace and paid for with sacrifice every single day.